Hello and welcome to World Insight with Tian Wei, coming to you live from Beijing on CGTN. Coming up on today's program, a dialogue with the world's political parties is underway in Beijing, the first and biggest of its kind. What lessons could be learned from the experience of both the CPC and its foreign counterparts? And the 30th World AIDS Day takes center stage today, December 1st. How far have we gone in dealing with the deadly HIV? And we start today's program in Beijing. It's the second day of the gathering called the Communist Party of China in Dialogue with the World Political Parties High-Level Meeting. Leaders from nearly 300 parties and political organizations in more than 120 countries are on hand to discuss the responsibilities of political parties. CPC General Secretary Xi Jinping attended the meeting and delivered a keynote speech on the theme, "Work hard, hand in hand to build a better world." He called on world parties to get with the program and carried out their mission. He also expressed the willingness of the CPC to continue contributing to world peace, stability, and development. This is one of the very first high-level dialogue between the CPC and other political parties around the world.
面向未来，中国共产党
Looking into the future, the Communist Party of China hopes to strengthen exchanges with other political parties from across the world, share our experiences in party and state governance, carry out enlightened communication and dialogue, strengthen strategic mutual trust, and work with people around the world to build a community with a shared future for mankind, and strive to make the world a better place.
Some representatives to the dialogue spoke about what can be learned from the CPC and China. Take a listen.
I think China brings new opportunities to the world, not only through its Belt and Road Initiative, but also through the goals set during the 19th CPC National Congress. I'm also looking forward to see what inspiration China can provide to other parts of the world, from its perspective of socialism with Chinese characteristics.
Parties nowadays should not only see what is happening in their own countries, but also what is interconnected throughout the world, a community with a shared destiny for mankind. Such a concept is a major contribution of Chinese wisdom.
And for more on the high-level meeting of the world political parties, we are joined in our Beijing studio by Victor Gao Zhikai, our current affairs commentator. Welcome, sir. And also in D.C., we have Joe Rubin, former Deputy Assistant Secretary of State from the United States. I want to welcome to the both of you. Mr. Gao, I want to start with you. Since you're here in China, and you know this is one of the very first high-level political parties gathering, quite a number of them. Why this party, this gathering?
This gathering, this dialogue is truly unprecedented. That's never happened before in recent memory, not on such a global scale with such a massive participation. I think the underlying message is clear. In more recent years, many people, including many major political parties in other countries of the world, are curious about what's happening in China, why China has managed to achieve so much progress and transformation, what's the role of the Communist Party of China, and how does the Communist Party of China manage to make all these achievements. And I think to satisfy this curiosity and to provide answers to their questions is a main responsibility of this dialogue. Of course, CPC also wants to learn from other political parties in other parts of the world so that they can work together going forward to make greater progress for the common prosperity of mankind.
Mr. Rubin, I understand there are also some American political parties attending, for example, from the Republican Party, but not necessarily, you know, the party whip. So the question is, what kind of inspirations can the parties share with one another? How relevant are political parties these days in international politics, and let's just say also international relations?
Yeah, no, this is a great question, and it's a strong symbol for China to be able to convene political parties from around the world. And in the United States context, political parties are central to our ability to organize and make effect in politics. And we have a two-party system, but we have more than two parties, clearly. And I think for China to engage in this discussion of political party organizing, lessons learned, building bridges to other political parties around the world. It strengthens their ability to then influence the politics as well in those countries. So it's a very savvy move. There's substantive areas where lessons can be shared, but also it does increase their influence in other countries.
Let's talk about that, the influence. I mean, the Chinese President Xi Jinping, who is also Secretary of the Chinese Communist Party, talking about China is not to export its model, but China is not to import others' model into China, but rather learn from the others. What does it mean? Because after the 19th Party Congress, when China was talking about the China model, some people are suspicious, Mr. Gao, about whether China wants to export so-called its political system and the party system to the others. And Xi explained quite clearly this time that China is not trying to do that.
Well, as General Secretary Xi Jinping has very eloquently pointed out, China is now practicing socialism with Chinese characteristics. This is very unique to China and very much suited to the circumstances here in China. It cannot be implemented by any other country in the world. Therefore, China does not have an ideology to export to other countries. China does not have a model readily exportable to other countries where other countries can just pick it up and implement in their own countries. On the other hand, while China is eager to learn from all the other countries in how they practice and how they perform and achieve transparency, but there is no single model in anywhere in the world that China can import back to China.
Yeah, but you know, Dr. Gao, when your economy is growing fast, when you become the engine of the world economy, when you are getting ever more influential in the world, people want to know your model. People want to know how it works in your country, and they sometimes imitate, and sometimes they draw inspirations from. So when you are saying you're not advocating your model, when you're saying you are not exporting your model, what is likely to be China's reaction and Chinese Communist Party's reaction to others try to imitate?
Well, if we look at the experience and track record of China over the past 4 decades, including what the Communist Party of China has successfully done in China, several things really stand out, which can be of relevance to all the other political parties in every country in the world. That is, how to maintain stability at home, and how to keep peace abroad, and how to refuse to be complacent with your progress and achievements, and how to be always innovative, to push the edge of the envelope and try to come up with more reforms and constantly implementing reforms. And I think in this area, all the other political parties can benefit from exchanging ideas with China and learn from China's experience.
Talking about China's experience, one of the most important things is China is opening to the world, and reform and opening up has been once again committed during the 19th Party Congress. Mr. Rubin, many are asking what kind of reform is China having in mind, trying to do it in the very near future, and what kind of opening up spirit China could maintain and probably even prosper in the near future when China is becoming ever more richer than it used to be.
Well, certainly when it comes to reform for China in the economy, in the economic sector, that is where the greatest improvements can be made for engaging the rest of the world. And China's economy has been in many ways closed off to much of the investment from around the world. The United States, for years, we've been engaged in trying to open up the Chinese markets, protect American intellectual property from our businesses. And essentially, as President Trump and Democratic leaders as well have called for, reducing the trade imbalance. So that's an area of reform. Now, politically, though, it's very important to understand that in the United States, our political parties are not seen as the government. They compete for the ability to govern the government, but the government is largely comprised of a civil service bureaucracy that is not loyal to one political party. And that is going to be a challenge for China as it continues to engage other countries around the world about its model of political party activism. Many countries also do have the model of competing political parties, but an independent civil service bureaucracy that is the government, and the parties end up winning power to govern, but they are not the identified solely with the government. And that's going to be a real area of reform question for China going forward.
Victor, you want to respond to that?
Yes, I think in addition to how the Communist Party of China has managed to make all these achievements over the past 4 decades, I think many other things can be learned by other political parties in foreign countries, including, for example, how to train the leaders and the cadres of the Communist Party of China. And the fact that this dialogue took place in the CPC Central Committee Central Party School is also very meaningful, because it is at this Central Party School that the senior leaders of China are trained very periodically. And I think every time when a senior leader needs to get a promotion, he or she need to go back to the Central Party School for retraining. And this is the key link in getting the leaders in the Communist Party of China up to date with knowledge, not only in China, but also globally on a large scale.
And the other thing, you know, a lot of things people are doing are at government level. But in China, since the ruling party has been the Chinese Communist Party for a long time, it is also becoming the backbone of the government. And therefore, a lot of things are being done in the party level. For example, anti-corruption drive. That is one interesting example. You see that anti-corruption is being done in government, but this time this is in political party. Joe, what do you make of this reality in China? And also, will this practice you see, as you observed from China's success so far, will that be another factor contributing to its potential in the future? Joe.
Well, the execution of effective governance is fundamental to a country's overall development and growth and prosperity. So to have a trained cadre of political leaders who understand how to effectively run the government, to be transparent, to root out corruption, as you described, to engage the citizens who are affected by government's decisions and engage them in a way where they're getting the best ideas and implementing them in a way that works for the society. That is a really difficult feat, but trick, that is. But if it's achieved, it can be a major feat for the country. And clearly China is looking at governance and trying to ensure that its political leadership can govern effectively and transparently. I will say, though, that political competition is critical to ensuring that we have good governance as well. In the United States, we have this idea that if the government's not working, throw the bums out, as we say, and elect some new leaders. And that is a level of accountability to the public that we have in our system. It's never perfect, but it's essential to ensure that the government is doing what it says it's trying to achieve.
Of course, over the past few years, we have also seen that party fights inside the Beltway, which has led to some in-governance, as they say. But let's put it aside, because nobody is exporting model, nobody is importing model. So it has to be one country which decides on its own political model and political party systems. Having said that, though, at this specific gathering of so many political parties, some figures showed up. Aung San Suu Kyi, for example, Dr. Gao is there. We know some of the controversy recently going on with Rohingya in the country. And we also see, Dr. Gao, for example, the ruling party leader from South Korea. We understand China and South Korea over the past few months or even 1 year has not necessarily been in close contact due to the THAAD system controversy. And now this time, South Korean ruling party leader is coming to China to that conference. So it seems this party politics goes on, or Congress going on among those parties, are actually creating some kind of possibilities for politics among countries. Victor.
Well, first of all, I think it's a very good development that Aung San Suu Kyi is here in Beijing for this very important dialogue. Myanmar itself is faced with many challenges: domestic development, how to maintain peace, how to maintain its own international status on the global stage, etc. So I think for Aung San Suu Kyi and her political party to come here to learn from how China has managed to do all these transformation and manage the stability at home and keep improving its international status on the global stage is very relevant. Now, for the South Korean ruling party, I think it's also very important because both China and South Korea need to improve their relations, and the ruling party in South Korea will have a very important role to play in the coming years to facilitate President Moon of South Korea and the ruling party government in South Korea to continue to improve its relations, both political as well as trade and economic relations with China, because it's mutually beneficial. It's good for China as well as for the Republic of Korea.
Joe, you probably have noticed that since the 19th Party Congress, the Chinese president, both as the president of the country and also general secretary of the Chinese Communist Party, the ruling party, has been quite active internationally for different kinds of organizations, meetings in China, party gatherings, as well as some of the former and incumbent leader meetings taking place in China, trying to explain to the rest of the world what China has in mind and what he, as top leader in China, has in mind, how important it is for the international community to get a clear idea and an exact idea of what China really wants to accomplish.
Well, President Xi has clearly positioned himself internationally as the leading voice of the political leadership around the globe. He has positioned China effectively, and the United States is looking now to China on a number of issues for assistance, be it North Korea and the nuclear program, other issues in the region that we could look into in greater detail. But the bottom line is what you're saying is accurate, that China and President Xi right now are, in a way, setting the agenda internationally in terms of international engagements on a variety of issues. And that is good for China. It is essential, though, that China begins to look at this role not as just about China. The question is, how will China engage multilaterally through the United Nations in the economic sphere, in the trade sphere, in the security sphere, and take on some responsibilities globally that many leaders around the world have been looking to them to do. Now is the window. But I do think for the United States as well, it's very controversial as well. There's a lot of concern that the United States is losing its leadership role. Certainly President Xi has done nothing to dissuade commentators from viewing it as such, and he's definitely making his presence felt.
I see. Victor, is China trying to seek a leadership role? China said not. Of the world, but China certainly have a very big agenda about how itself and together with others can move forward. President Xi, after all, talking about a shared future, a common community.
Definitely. I think the more China becomes transparent, the better for the rest of the world. And transparency not only applies to the Chinese government, Chinese military, but also very importantly to the Chinese Communist Party, the ruling party here in China. China, I think, can make the greatest contribution to mankind, to the world at large, by keeping its own house in good order, because this will ensure that China will live in peace, in stability, and will make great contribution to mankind. And other countries can come and see what's exactly happening, and I think to become more transparent, to become more accountable and more responsible is the right thing for China to do, both for the government, military, as well as for the civil society and for the Communist Party of China.
Right. When I was talking to both of you gentlemen, I was looking also at the Christmas decorations in front of the White House, right in your background there, Mr. Rubin, right there. Certainly this is almost the end of the year, the Christmas season and the New Year season coming. So it is wonderful to have people from very different political parties from all over the world to gather together, have a big gathering. Hopefully they're going to seek some experience and inspirations from one another. But for now, we did have some inspirations and also insights from both of you. So thank you so much, Joe Rubin in Washington, D.C., and Victor Gao Zhikai here in Beijing. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for being with us. And you're watching World Insight with me, Tian Wei. Still to come on our program. The 30th World AIDS Day is observed today after 3 decades of dealing with the deadly HIV. Cause for celebration or still a cause for concern? We'll ask our panelists right after this break. Welcome back. You're still watching World Insight with me, Tian Wei, coming to you Monday to Friday on CGTN. Today marks the 30th anniversary of the World AIDS Day. This year's theme is increasing impact through transparency, accountability, and partnerships. It is estimated that nearly 37 million people are living with HIV worldwide, while about 2 million lose the fight against HIV/AIDS each year. December the 1st has been designated World AIDS Day since 1988 to raise awareness of the AIDS pandemic and mourn the lives lost.
HIV, or human immunodeficiency virus, targets the immune system. Over time, the immune system begins to fail, which is called immunodeficiency. This increases the risk of infections that a healthy immune system would usually be able to fend off. AIDS, or acquired immune deficiency syndrome, is a set of symptoms caused by HIV. At the end of June 2017, nearly 420,000 people in China were infected with HIV, and there were 300,000 AIDS patients in the country. More than 221,000 people have died of HIV/AIDS in China since records began. There are people suffering from HIV/AIDS across the country, but the highest concentration reside in Guangxi Autonomous Region, Sichuan Province, and Yunnan Province. There are more male carriers than female. The ratio of HIV carriers is 3.5 male to 1 female, and the ratio of AIDS patients is 4.2 male to 1 female. The majority of HIV carriers in China contracted the virus via sex, followed by drug use, mother-to-child infection, and blood donation.
And for more on World AIDS Day, we are joined in our Beijing studio Shao Yiming. Long time no see, sir. Good to have you back, who is the chief expert on AIDS at the China Center for Disease Control and Prevention. With us here is a new friend who's been here in China not long and yet doing instrumental work, Amma Sande, who is the UNAIDS country director. Welcome to our program too. And nice also in Tennessee, in the United States, we are inviting Dr. William Schaffler, who is the professor and chair of preventive medicine at Vanderbilt University Medical Center. I want to welcome the three of you. I want to start with you, Mr. Shao. We see each other almost every time when there's World AIDS Day. And this year, once again, it's not just about thinking about the lives lost to AIDS, but also to celebrate a cause that everybody has been working so hard on. Tell us, Dr. Shao, where are we now? How far is that disease come still from us, or how close is it still from us?
Worldwide, as the program mentioned earlier, 36 million people are carrying HIV/AIDS. In China, there are about around 1 million. And the reported cases are still increasing. By the end of the third quarter, the end of September, already 105,000 people has been diagnosed as HIV and AIDS.
Right.
And this year. So, but we tested quite a number of people. The test cases increased 70% in the first 3 quarters, but the diagnosed case increased 9%.
I see. So where is China exactly? What are some of the main causes that are leading to HIV cases here in China?
Let me start by saying that UNAIDS is really impressed by the progress China has made, because for a country with 1.4 million people, if the government hadn't moved quickly to get things under control, we would have had a catastrophe in this country. So relatively speaking, China has done extremely well, and the epidemic has evolved here over time, starting with injecting drug use. That epidemic is now declining steeply And China is actually an example to other countries about how to manage epidemics amongst the HIV epidemic in drug-using people. The challenge now particularly is what we call sexual transmission of HIV, because 94% of new infections in China happen through the sexual route. And particularly amongst gay men and men who have sex with men, the numbers are on the increase. They account for almost 30% of new infections. So we are particularly concerned about gay men, but we are also concerned about young people. That's where to move the emphasis to. As both of you may know, I'm also myself is a Red Ribbon ambassador here against the HIV/AIDS here in China. We've been traveling together with many of our colleagues to different universities around the country to help the young people understand about necessity and also information needed urgently. But you know, Dr. Shao, we have to say there is a deficit of sexual education and health education in China's curriculum, particularly in the middle school and the high school. So when the university students come into the campus, they still have very little information about what they need to know as adults after they become 18 years old. Dr. Shao.
Yes, that is true. As Amma mentioned, the transmission in China already from blood to sexual transmission. That means that the people who are at risk are not a small group of people, like drug users or contaminated plasma donors, but they are people who have sex, which are larger population.
A larger population is vulnerable.
Yes, and also, as you mentioned, sexual education is extremely important to prepare our youngsters from entering their adult life. But as people see that sex education is still not well performed, in some part of the society is still taboo. So, and also, even though we have in the high school or middle school curriculum in that information, but many schools are just skip that part.
They will let the students go back and read on their own, which usually means you don't have to do your homework at all. So
but there's one important thing that actually society moving much faster than we expected.
And then the curriculum also.
And also people become in their real life are more liberal, more open. And they are
this
seeking.
Is a migrant society we're talking about. People are on the move all the time, away from family, and they have to establish themselves. A lot of pressure. People resort to their own way of doing things. Let me go to Dr. Schaffner, also in the United States. And you were smiling listening to your two colleagues here based in China talking about the challenges they are facing right now. What do you understand globally, the current stage of fighting HIV/AIDS? When you are listening to your colleagues here in China talking about the current set of challenges, how do you relate to them?
Well, first of all, my congratulations to my colleagues in China, because they are making extraordinary progress in their struggle against AIDS. And I was smiling because the things they were saying sound so familiar. We've been there, and we still are there here in the United States. Also, we could do much better with sex education. The young people, of course, don't have a sense of how fierce and how terrible AIDS was, because now in the United States and increasingly in China around the world, we are changing AIDS from a fatal infection to a chronic disease. In the United States, we have over 1 million people now who are under treatment for HIV infection successfully, but there are still many young people, people of color, who are undiagnosed, and that continues to be our challenge here.
Well, talking about the challenges, it is not new that is facing, the community which, Amma, you are working for. But you see, every different continent and every different country has their own set. The question is, how would they correlate with one another? And how would they work with a concentrated focus and force so that it is not divergent, but rather be able to work together much more than it used to be?
I think already with the HIV response, we've seen an unprecedented global movement and partnership that has come up together to fight this disease. We haven't had the kind of partnerships, resource mobilization around a singular disease like we've had for HIV. And there's been tremendous progress, particularly when you look at the science and management of HIV. But I do think that the next phase of the response really needs to look at stigma and discrimination. And this is something we share across the global community because of how HIV is transmitted. In every community, every continent, every place, there is still fear, there is still shame, and that's become our biggest challenge, because even without a vaccine or a cure, we have all the tools we need today to achieve epidemic control. But people are going underground and away from services, testing and treatment, and that's why we have the number of deaths you were reporting earlier, because we need to come together as a global community to address.
Is that the big question for China? I mean, testing and even the treatment is being provided free of charge to anyone who goes there and try to, in a way, seek help. But that is still a big problem. Was it because of lack of information to get access to these facilities or treatment, or is it because people just do not want to be, quote-unquote, discriminated by the others because they are worried or concerned that they might be HIV carriers?
I mean, the concern is always there, but the environment compared with the past is much, much better. Like our top leaders, they came out to see AIDS almost every year.
They shake hands
Yes.
with the AIDS patients.
Yeah.
Our First Lady is also the ambassador on the cause of HIV/AIDS.
Yes, that's a very good example. And also the country has provided a law to protect the rights of HIV-infected people. And also all the public health agencies or hospitals have to keep high confidentiality for what the test results. And they have to prevent of discrimination from jobs, from education.
But why is still AMA talking about the possibility that people are afraid of discriminated and they do not want to come out and seek help and seek treatment?
I think there's, we need not only the education of the medical circle and the government, but also the general public. The general public, they still consider AIDS as a very terrible disease, but when science progress already a lot, AIDS is not a death sentence anymore. AIDS patients after treatment, they can have a very healthy and long life, like other chronic disease like diabetes or hypertension.
Even the quality of life could be a little bit challenged as a result, even though they're on medication. Having said that, though, let me go to you, Mr. Schaffner, about some of the common issues around the world that people are looking at when it comes to HIV/AIDS. For example, vaccine. For example, medication. There is a interesting movement that is going on right now to seek possibility of cheaper vaccine and also to seek possibility of cheaper medication coming from developing countries, China included. So, Dr. Schaffner, what do you make of that trend? Will that, in a way, bring the international community closer of seeking solutions? Dr. Schaffner.
Yes, I think actually the international community is collaborating much more than it did before, and we're trying to work on two things. First is better treatment, so that we can indeed, throughout the world, transform AIDS from a fatal infection to, as was just said by my colleague, a chronic disease that is well managed with a long life expectancy. But that said, we also need to continue to work on a vaccine, because vaccines prevent disease. And right now, there is a new trial of a vaccine that's beginning in South Africa, an international collaboration largely sponsored by the National Institutes of Health here in the United States. And my fingers are crossed. We say that in the United States. I have great hopes that that trial will result in a vaccine that we can use to prevent infection.
How much hope shall we put on vaccine? Amma?
I think, like he says, some very positive progress is being made, and certainly for UNAIDS, we hope we can very soon get to a vaccine and a cure. We are not there yet, but there is excellent collaboration going. But I do want to emphasize the point, if I may, once again, that the science in the management of HIV has advanced tremendously. Yes, we want a vaccine. Absolutely, we want a cure. But it's also important to acknowledge what toolbox we have today. And what I'm saying is, with what we have today, we can get this epidemic under control. I think part of the problem is perhaps we in the health sector have owned this thing too much. We need others to come on board and fight together with us, but we also need to update them with the information. The biggest story in 2017 is something we call U equals U, which means if you're on effective treatment, the chances of you transmitting HIV to your partner are almost negligible. This is a powerful message that we have in the health community, but does the ordinary person have it out there? And because the ordinary person doesn't have it, we still have fear. You know,
fear is the key word.
Fear is the key word, and we still tell stories of heroism and bravado. We put people up and we say this is a brave person for working with an HIV-infected person. Well, that was true 5-10 years ago. Now things have changed. And yes, let's aspire, let's get the motivation around the vaccine, but let's use what we have.
But here's the thing, you need to have certain kind of fear so that people will be able to discipline themselves and be away from the disease. That is one thing. But you also shouldn't have the fear. When you are with those people, we are dealing with those people who already got HIV, AIDS, or suspicious of having the HIV, AIDS. So how should we deal with this fear factor? It works both ways.
I think we reframe the message. Remember, we are coming from an era of despair, where you watched people die. There was nothing you could do. I think as we advance with every stage of managing the epidemic, we need to change the message. And yes, the message I conveyed is important, but equally it has to be a balanced message. You can say, look, we have the tools today for managing HIV effectively as a chronic disease, but if you're negative, you stay negative, because going on lifelong medication is also not a good idea for you.
It is not a good idea at all. But Dr. Shao, is that going to be enough? I mean, how to see this so-called fear factor?
I mean, everything has double side. When you don't have a drug, everybody fear. And people do die very fast. But when you have free drugs everywhere, people don't fear, which is not good. As we see education, you can have education providing care, love, but at the same time, you have to really let people really know AIDS still cause people die. We still have millions of people die each year. So that is a terrible disease. We have to try everything to prevent it, especially for China. You know, unlike Africa, who have maybe 5% of population already got infected, China, there's less than 0.1% people got infected. That means 99.9% of people are healthy. So we have to do both things at the same time, to educate people, try everything to prevent to be infected.
I see.
Yeah.
Dr. Schaffner, we only have 1 minute left. I want to also get your views about that fear factor, as they say, how to balance it, as the other two guests just mentioned.
Well, I like to talk about respect so that we understand the disease, we respect it. Fear is kind of dangerous, but if we respect it and can tell people it's like diabetes, important to diagnose, we know how to treat it, and with medical care, you can live a long, productive life in your family and have a professional career and be satisfactory that way.
All right.
So I think education is terribly important, and what you're doing, getting the education directly to the people through the media, is very, very important.
I want to thank the three of you. I'm celebrating this day, World AIDS Day, with you because we have come a long way and we have achieved a lot. And yet, of course, there's daunting tasks ahead. Thank you so much for the three of you for being with us. William Schaffner joining us from the United States, and Ama Sande, as well as Shao Yiming here in Beijing. Thank you so much, the three of you, for being with us.
Thank
and
you.
keep on with the great work, the three of you.
Yeah.
Thank you. That is all the time we have for today. If you'd like to see more, try to find us World Insight CGTN into your search engine, or check out our YouTube channel. You can also follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Sina Weibo. From me, Tian Wei, and everyone on the World Insight team, thanks for watching. Tune in again next time for insights across China and around the world. Good night.